Seems fair to me.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook. Lots to talk about this week, but first, a little program note. You won't see us next week because, in its wisdom, the Democratic National Committee decided to hold its final night of the convention on a Thursday night, conflicting with us. So, hey, what are you going to do? We'll be back a week after that. Let's meet the panelists, starting with Amy Marxkors of KMOX, who's sitting in for Wendy Weiss, who's taking the night off. Bill McClellan from the Post-Dispatch. Sarah Fenske, executive editor of St. Louis Magazine, and Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American. Well, it wasn't very good news last Friday night in Ferguson when a protest turned violent, and today the family of Officer Travis Brown says he's still fighting for his life, although the condition seems to be improving a little bit. He was struck by a protester. Among other things, a fellow by the name of Keith Rose was arrested. He happens to be on the Civilian Oversight Board, Sarah, in the city of St. Louis. He oversees the behavior of police. He's also an alternate to the Democratic National Convention. At least 3 aldermen now are saying that he should no longer be on this Civilian Review Board. What do you think?
I think they're wrong about it. I understand where they're coming from. You know, you can't have somebody who's out of control sitting on these boards. But this is a man who has yet to get his day in court. And Javad Kazali, who's the defense attorney on this case, a very good defense attorney, he feels confident that this man is going to be found not guilty. He also points out, just to be clear, this man is not charged with doing anything that injured this officer. A different person has been charged in that case with some pretty serious felonies. In this case, what Keith is accused of doing basically amounts to shaking a fence. There is not a victim in this particular crime other than a fence. And so there's a lot of aldermen saying, let's wait, let's give this man his day in court. Certainly somebody who's been through the criminal justice system and been vindicated could become a great member of the Citizens Oversight Board for the police. I think they're right about that.
I mean, I disagree. I think even if he were to be found not guilty, even if it never reaches a courtroom, he should step down. He should voluntarily step down. There is such thing as being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I even think it's beyond that. You were at a scene where a police officer was gravely injured. You do not need to be on a civilian review board.
So anyone who's at a scene where a police officer gets injured, they don't get to sit there and try to...
Not under these circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be someplace and be trying to help a police officer in something, but this... There's just no excuse for it.
Yeah, when you say shaking of, all he was doing was shaking a fence, that's why the police went out there to break up. You know, they were letting, when the protest was nonviolent, the police were letting everything go. And when the protesters started shaking the fence and damaging the fence, that's when they sent the police out, and the policeman got injured. And I think that Keith Rose, had he just been there, that'd be great, and maybe even laudable to be watching and observing. But when you're participating in the destruction of property, I think that Keith Rose ought
alleged to participate.
What is his value added? Here's a guy who in 2018 was arrested in Clayton because he chained his neck to the door of Senator Roy Blunt in Clayton because he was protesting Blunt's position on Brett Kavanaugh and his rise to the Supreme Court. What's the value added of having someone like that overseeing the conduct of police officers?
I think there's a lot of value added. I think being somewhat skeptical and somewhat critical of authority is an important role for these oversight boards. I really do. And so you want someone who's going to come in and say, okay, did they behave appropriately in this case, rather than automatically taking their side on things? Keith has this perspective as somebody who's outside the system calling for change. That's a good perspective.
I'll agree that there's perspective for somebody who's doing something nonviolent. I have a very good friend who once chained himself to the Pentagon fence or something, and I thought it showed his character. But shaking the fence and destroying property rises above
Yeah, I
that.
don't think this man has shown himself to be a really good judge of what is conduct unbecoming and what's not, although chaining yourself to the door outside a home brings new perspective to the term outside agitator. But I feel like I don't know that he is really one who should judge what's lawful and what's conduct unbecoming when he was definitely at least a part of that.
Well, I think things have changed after Friday night and actually after this past spring, especially at Washington University, when Andrew Martin, the chancellor of WashU, really cracked down on all the protesters. 100 were arrested. A lot of them lost their jobs. They're in limbo right now. They don't know if they're going to get their undergraduate or master's degrees. There's a huge price to pay. And actually, even this week in Chicago, officials there are saying that protesters will not be able to walk around downtown on the streets that they want to, that they'll be allowed to protest in certain corners, but they won't be given full access for the Democratic convention, which I think the worm has turned.
I think you're right. I think the mood has kind of, you know, people do not approve of these types of protests, but I think it's in the moments when people don't approve of them that they become more important than ever. I don't like this idea that, oh, if you want to protest, you can do it on this corner that's far out of view. I don't like that the Democratic Party is doing that, and I understand that is the mood right now.
All right, I don't like that either. I know you have to have some sort of security, but okay, on Friday, the Urban League had groundbreaking for Urban League Plaza, okay? And as I was driving there, and you drive by Canfield Lane where the march and that protest, people were leaving there, and I'm going there, and it's, you know, just a sunny Friday and all that. Mike McClellan, the president and CEO of Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis, in his remarks, cited the history of the Ferguson Police Department and how they had never had a black chief. And in 2014, I think 3 of 53 officers were black. No officer in the history of the force in 2014 had ever risen above the sergeant. Now there's a black chief, there's a black police officers, there's, you know, like that, more than half of the staff and police officers of Ferguson Police Department are people of color. And on that very night, a black police officer ends up critically wounded by an alleged black assailant. I'm sorry, but the public does look at that and say, okay, that's it. 10 years, this happened, and with any protest, one reason it's successful is because you have at least a slight majority of people that are with you on that protest, and I think that is over now. I think people can protest, people can be activists, but they ought to be prepared that they aren't going to be welcomed with open arms the way they have been in the past.
And I don't think they were in the past. And I think, sorry, I've got to just finish up on this point Alvin has made. I don't think we would have seen all the changes that we have seen in Ferguson, which are laudable changes. And to have Chief Troy Doyle there, who seems like an incredible chief, we have that because of protest.
Oh, no, we have it because of that federal court order. There's still a monitor looking over the Ferguson
But I
Police
think if
Department
there
to this day.
hadn't been all the protests that followed Michael Brown's body laying in the street, the feds would not have gotten involved.
No, I agree with you, but what I'm saying is the reaction to is going to be different now.
All right, let's move on to our next topic. Amy, I want to ask you about the 250,000 plus signatures that were collected and are going to put this initiative petition, a constitutional amendment, on the November ballot in the state of Missouri, which would basically reverse the decision by lawmakers to ban almost all abortions in the state of Missouri. Missouri was the first state to have almost a complete ban on abortion after the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade in June of 2022. So, in 7 states where this issue's been on the ballot, people have come out to vote, and in all 7 states, the pro-choice crowd has won, and even in 3 red states. So do you think the pro-choice crowd will come out in November and approve the legal right to abortion in Missouri, but also at the same time, maybe enhancing the chances of Democrats like Lucas Kunce, Crystal Quaid, and Ray Hartman?
Right. No, it's interesting that this is a ballot initiative that voters will be looking at here. And you referenced the Dobbs decision overturning Roe, and a lot of these states had very restrictive trigger laws that would immediately go into place if Roe were to be overturned. That's what happened here. And you see relatively red states, conservative states like Kansas, vote in favor of abortion. What this would do would enshrine in the Missouri Constitution reproductive rights and abortion. And this one is interesting to me because I do think the pro-choice crowd will come out. You have the female vote. I don't think J.D. Vance did the Republican Party any favors when it talked about childless cat ladies. And I'm a conservative, I'm pro-life, and I found that incredibly offensive and harmful and hurtful. So I do think they have a lot of motivated voters out there when it comes to this amendment. What's interesting is I do wonder if this amendment frees up maybe some Republican voters who are a bit more moderate when it comes to being pro-life, pro-choice, because we do know we live in a pro-choice society, that perhaps they vote in favor of this amendment enshrining reproductive rights, but at the same time, maybe still vote Republican in other races.
I think that when you vote, and like I say, we used to actually have, like, you know, you went in the box and nobody knew what you were voting for. But this is one of those issues, like you said, like, all right, we're not having a debate out in public, and nobody really knows what box I'm going to mark. I think it'll pass. I won't say with ease, but I think it will pass because of that. I think I don't have to declare a stance on this. In fact, I can go out and say, like, how bad it was that it passed, even though I voted for it. And I think that's just a reality, not here, but in many states.
And if it does pass, I do think, too, even pro-lifers can point their finger at the Republican Party. I don't mean to be harsh here, but they were like the dog that caught the car. Roe was overturned, and you saw mixed messages. You saw Republican leaders coming out talking about contraception. What in the world are you talking about? None of the pro-life people that I am talking to are like, oh, we should ban contraception as well. And
or
I think,
IVF.
Or IVF. I mean, you are getting into some of the most personal, intimate issues that I think is going to hurt even normally maybe more pro-life voters.
Well, I hope that this does help the Democrats, and I'd love to see it help our friend Ray Hartman. But voters in Missouri do have this ability to support something but vote for the people who oppose it. I mean, like right to work is a big one. I mean, the people support right to work, and yet they vote for anti-right to work, anti-union candidates. So I'm not sure exactly what'll happen.
And I could throw real quick, the tax abatement, maybe not the wrong word, for people that had like preschools in their home. I thought that would pass because I was thinking, like, I don't think people in the state really understand what they would do if this were to pass. But yet people in Missouri said, like, you know what? I feel for people that have preschools in their home, but I think we're about to give a big tax break to some like money-making facilities. And they figured that out. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one, Bill.
Hey, Sarah Fenske, let me ask you about a story you wrote in this week's St. Louis Magazine, or that the magazine had, and that is that the International Institute happens to have an executive who's also with the Missouri Office of Refugee Administration, and he told one local group, Welcome Neighbor, headed up by Jessica Bueller, that no, there's not enough room for 22 more refugees in St. Louis. And I'm not even sure he read their application, which is kind of strange because I was under the belief for the past year or more, we've heard, hey, to increase the population, improve the economy, we have to bring refugees to the St. Louis area.
Yeah, this has been such a mantra for civic leaders, and frankly, coming from the International Institute as well. They've kind of pitched this campaign that this is the key to solving so many of St. Louis's problems, to bring more immigrants here. And then you have this group that has a really good track record of just doing terrific things for refugees in St. Louis. They got turned down. And they're calling foul on this. Jessica Bueller, who is the executive director of this group, she says she thinks it's a conflict of interest that this person who's an employee of the International Institute is sort of running this state office and has a say in whether or not her group's application gets turned down. She's saying, wait a minute, they just want to keep these kind of federal funds to themselves. They're afraid of this competition. Now, the International Institute insisted this guy operates independently, even though he's an employee. He's not looking after their best interest. He's looking after the region's interest. He believes that the public schools can't necessarily handle an influx of more people. And frankly, you know, knowing some of the issues right now in our public schools makes a good argument there. Well, what they can't really explain is why does the International Institute get to bring in 1,300 refugees? This group can't have 22.
Well, the Institute about a month ago did say, hey, St. Louis, you know, pony up because we need some money if we want to bring immigrants here because there's no affordable housing.
Yeah.
The state has not been really providing Medicaid to kids like it's supposed to. And at the same time, I mean, you point out the schools are jammed. So maybe they have a point. Maybe we can't handle 22 more refugees.
What happened with that prominent attorney who was
Jerry Schlichter.
Yes, who was leading the charge to bring in all these Afghan refugees. We were going to have an Afghan Chamber of Commerce.
And he has come through on that. He has really done some nice work for the Afghans here, put a lot of money into it, and the International Institute is working to create these things that he dreamed up. I don't know that he and other civic leaders are aware that this group that wanted to bring in more, that they kind of like hit this roadblock here. I do think St. Louis has some systemic issues that we have to deal with if this is going to be a good place for refugees to live. I think so many of these refugee families, they end up pretty quickly moving to the county because they don't have a great experience at the school.
Well, I was going to say, like, well, is the county off limits? I mean, it sounds like,
which counties? St. Charles, Warren, Jefferson?
Right. 22 people?
It's not that
I mean, I don't want to say like we could like sneak 22 people in, but I mean they would just be kind of enveloped into the community.
Right.
You know, every church, every mosque, every synagogue should adopt 2 families.
Yeah, and it's done.
Then we'd be done. Hey, Bill, I want to ask you. You've been writing about transportation issues in the city's public schools. You know, they lost their bus vendor this year, and so according to the public schools, about 6,000 kids will be on yellow buses on Monday for the first day of school. About 6,000 will be in sedans and minivans and ride shares and whatever. And then about 1,400 are going to get Metro passes. Although the head of Metro last week expressed some concern whether his system could provide security and take care of the details. You suggested in a column that maybe it should be like Dunkirk, where people volunteer and take the kids to school. Are you pretty confident?
Well, no, I didn't suggest it should be like Dunkirk. I said it is like Dunkirk. You know, when Winston Churchill, if you have a boat that can cross the channel, get there. I mean, it is just astounding to me that it has reached this point, and now the school system, you know, trying to be upbeat about it, is talking about little first and second graders carrying car seats with them. You know, you get them to school in their car seat, and then they go between classes or something. It just, it's awful, and it's like this has suddenly surprised us that school is starting. You know, who would have thought that would happen in August? It's ridiculous.
The mayor,
I have no confidence in anything.
The mayor had a video message today that I was like, whoa. She put this video out saying, employers, if you have parents of St. Louis public school students working for you, just give them some grace, cut them some slack, basically implying like, this is going to be so complicated for them to get these kids to school. She said, in some cases, we don't even know what time the school day is starting. And I was like, okay, it's good to be cut some slack, but this is a little worrisome 3 days out.
Yeah. Well, okay, there's a great comedian, Richard Pryor, once said, you know, can't nobody stop water where it wants to go. I kind of feel like, all right, Monday might be just the worst day ever. I have some hope that it isn't. I got a feeling that maybe it'll be a little bit better, but I do think as each day goes by, it'll settle itself, and maybe it won't be just like a complete disaster day in and day out. Do I have confidence? Not a lot of it, but I do have some hope, and I really do think that people will get kids to school. I don't have the minivan anymore, but I almost felt compelled. It's like, what can I do? And I think there will be a lot of parents taking other kids and just
driving around.
Right. You know,
where are you going?
Right.
I mean,
nothing could go wrong with telling kids to get in your van.
I understand. I understand. But
Mr. Reid.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'll tell you what. If one more kid attends the first day of class than attended the first day of class in 2023, it will be called some type of triumph, and I think technically that could happen.
The miracle of St. Louis.
Right.
You know, and this just goes to show, too, that the school system has to do something about all these schools and just a few kids in here and a few kids
that just came up.
I mean, they have to just consolidate.
It's time.
Well, Amy Marxkors, let me ask you about downtown St. Louis. It's been reported that now local business people have spent up to $2.5 million to subsidize the shifts for the police and overtime, mostly in downtown. Some people think, what about North St. Louis? What about South St. Louis? How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, then that's the city failing those people, the very people that the city is supposed to stand up for, the city government is supposed to protect, that is supposed to serve. And it's I mean, if you are somebody who's downtown, you've got businesses, you've got homes, and you've got the means to protect those businesses and homes, and the government entity that is supposed to be doing that job isn't doing their job, it's not on the wealthy people for paying for security. It's the same thing with COVID. When you shut down schools, when you have remote learning, which kids were able to survive the best? With the kids that came from families that had the resources to pay for tutors, that had a stay-at-home parent, that could do online learning and had Wi-Fi and laptops. It's kind of the same idea. When government fails, it's going to hurt the neediest the most. And listen, you need protection, you need security, and if they're not doing the job and those have resources to pay for it.
Well, the neediest of the most always kind of get, you know, they're just kind of on the short end, whether it's government or just regular stuff. If I literally stumbled across $1 billion on the way to the car tonight, there are neighborhoods in St. Louis County that are predominantly black that I would, if I had the money, I would hire a police force to work those neighborhoods. Why? Because that neighborhood would then be absolutely safe, and then people would buy a house there, and people might start a business there, and it could help turn this around. All right, I'm not mad at wealthy people for trying to do downtown, but I wish people would do this. Pick a neighborhood. You got that much money? Pick a neighborhood.
I just hate that this is the system that we now have, and it is the system that we now have. You know, you have Shaw, you have the Grove, you have the Central West End paying for this private policing, and it's like, what are our tax dollars going to? Something is broken here if that's what gets decided. And I think the unfortunate downside of when wealthy people are able to insulate by paying for policing on their block, but not on the neighboring block, is you lose compassion for what everybody else is going through. You're like, oh, everything's just fine. And meanwhile, people are suffering who can't afford that private system.
Some people, like you know, friends who live in Soulard or in other parts of downtown who are paying for security, it's because they want to stay there.
No, for
sure. They want to raise their family there. My friend had both of her cars stolen in Soulard in the same weekend. Her insurance dropped her. She's got kids that she's raising there. They love the city. They want to stay there, but if they don't feel safe, it's either get security or leave.
No, I appreciate these city neighborhoods doing this because I don't want people to leave.
The city does have $250 million NFL dollars. And when the residents were polled, I mean, if you believe the poll that was conducted through the St. Louis portal, public safety didn't even get in the top 5. If you believe the portal,
I was going to say I don't know what to say about that.
I don't either,
because that'd be first on my list.
Well, what do you have to say about sports betting getting on the November ballot in Missouri? You know, the Cardinals and the Royals and the Chiefs have gone to Jefferson City, and every time they've been denied the ability to get sports betting passed.
Yeah.
What do you think, Alvin?
I think that I've been beating this drum since I've been on this show, right? Even before marijuana was legalized, all that stuff. Like, listen, this is money that the state could be making. Let's take the vice out of it. Let's just, hey, let's do this. And sure enough, Illinois did it. And sure enough, Kansas did it. And everybody's going across the borders, you know. And it's just like, it's about time. I do think it will pass. And let me tell you what, if you wanted to support your Olympic team, you should have done like Alvin Reid did and put a little bit of money on the USA women's basketball team to cover 19 against Japan, and you too would be about legalized gambling.
Well, Alvin is a person who recently put $100 on the Cubs to win the World Series, and the bookie said, "Are you drinking in the morning?" But no, I think legalized gambling would be fine if it were regulated to the point like the betting on individual players is just asking for things to go crooked.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
pro, yeah, college. If you wanted to say
even pro. Look at the young man who got in trouble for sitting out, and so he wouldn't make his point.
Jonte Porter?
Yeah, with a Missouri connection.
Yeah, it's obviously, it's inevitable that we're going to get sports betting. I don't know. I hate to be a prude. I want to be fun, but I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of a prude. I do feel like a bigger detriment to society overall than it is a benefit to society. I mean, you look at the cost, you look at consequential behaviors of gambling gone wrong, and how much does each gambling addict cost society? Baylor said it costs $10,000 for everybody who abuses gambling. But I do think it's inevitable that it's going to happen. I do worry that the billions and billions and billions of dollars of sports betting that are already there and will absolutely accelerate, I just hope the sports can maintain their integrity, because it gets really iffy when a lot of money gets involved.
You know, not every state has it. Texas doesn't have it. California doesn't have it. Idaho, Utah. So, and I heard on your radio station today, Amy, that Bloomberg News is reporting that Americans are taking money out of their stock brokerages accounts to spend it on sports betting. Ooh. And that's a problem if that's your nest egg.
Hey, what can I tell you? People need
This guy wants to have a good time.
People need to behave themselves, and you can't say that they wouldn't be spending it on something else.
But sometimes a low wall can be as effective as an impenetrable barrier. And when it comes to potentially destructive, addictive habits,
well, casinos hurt restaurants, for instance. You know, I mean, people have so much disposable money.
And but the casinos and the lottery have done so much for our area.
Yes. Go ask East St. Louis. Go ask Collinsville as far as the legalized cannabis. Go ask East St. Louis about legalized gambling. They make millions of dollars that they would not have. Everybody's
coming from the mayor of Sodom and Gomorrah, Alvin Reid. Hey, let's go to the old mailbag and see what people had to say about last week's program. We heard from Rich Hughes of Kirkwood, who said Bill's tongue-in-cheek Dunkirk analogy to the St. Louis Public School bus transportation issues didn't get nearly the panel recognition it deserved. That was last week. Satirical wit at its best. Thanks, Rich. Mike M. of St. Louis wrote, I live in the Hill neighborhood. There was a knock at my front door, and to my surprise, it was Wesley Bell going door to door handing out flyers and asking for my vote. I thought that this enthusiasm should be rewarded. Corey Bush never knocked on my door. Hey, you can write us, care of 9PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Don't forget those emails, Donnybrook@9pbs.org, and on social media, use #DonnybrookSTL. Why not call the wine line? We call it the 9 line here, 314-512-9094. And listen to us on your favorite podcast source, especially if you're out of town. When I go out of town, I love to listen to KMOX and rather 9PBS. I listen to it all. Sounds like I'm going to have to make another contribution to 9PBS. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to Amy Marxkors for joining us. And we'll see everybody next week.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.